Welcome back. It's another rousing week of filling in the history. I am the amateur historian, sounding a little better. I was sick there for a while. Sorry about that. This is episode 43. We're going to be talking about Doctrine and Covenants 121 through 123. And this is a really interesting moment because, I mean, to put it simply, this is all in one letter. There's a portion that is from another letter, but basically there were two letters written within a few days of each other. And that's where you get all of this put together. But there's a lot of history in between it all. So I'm going to try to cover all of that. And so today we're going to be, or today, this moment, right here, this moment, we're going to be talking about the rest of 1838, early 1839. And then we're going to get into that portion, that first portion of section 121. So for this, we get a ton of financial paperwork, licenses. We're going to skip through the vast majority of that. So this is like land deals and people getting licenses and all that kind of stuff. A lot of that's going to be skipped. What we're actually in here is the Liberty Jail moment. And if you are familiar with church history at all, you know that Liberty Jail is a major moment. I know some general authorities have called it the Temple Prison because there was a lot of very special and very sacred things that happened during that period, and so we're going to try to cover those. But at last we left our heroes was on July 8th of 1838 with a series of revelations happening on the same day. If you recall, 117, 18, 19, and 20 were all given on that same day. That's just how we have it today. We also get a letter on that same day to William Marks and Newell K. Whitney that shares the revelation that was directed to them, which is nice. So a copy was made, a letter was sent out, and we have a copy of that letter still, which is fun. After that, we get a deed, and then we get a certificate from Elias Higbee, which I will read. And this is kind of interesting. It says, "This is to certify that I have received satisfactory proof that a certain lot of goods taken by virtue of a search warrant found in possession of Sylvester Hewlett are goods stolen or embezzled, and are goods belonging to Joseph Smith Jr., Sidney Rigdon, and others, and Hyrum Smith. And I therefore deliver the said lot of goods unto Joseph Smith Jr. and others as aforesaid, and that he will take full possession of the same. Certified by me this 9th day of July, AD 1838, Elias Higbee, JCCCC. JCCCCCCC means Justice of the County. Now, I don't have any other information about what happened, but apparently somebody stole from the store that Joseph Smith and Sidney Rigdon and other people had partnered up in making for the Saints, and somebody stole their stuff. And Elias Higbee, and you'll see him sort of certifying a lot of documents here on out, is basically saying like, I'm the justice of the peace in this sort of area, and I'm taking care of business legally. So I wish I had more for you. I thought that was kind of fun to notice. I was like, I guess somebody stole from Joseph Smith. After this, we get a receipt from Samuel Music, very lovely name to hear. Minutes of a meeting on the 26th of July about a few rules being laid down, as well as defraying the expenses of those who went out to scout out land in Adamon and so forth, kind of taking care of, hey, we had to go on an expedition to find new land, and we need to reimburse the people who did that. It is resolved that the bishop can receive in his jurisdiction properties and so forth, but no further. And so at the time, if you recall, there was really only two bishops in the church. And so they're really dividing this out of like, no, you have a jurisdiction and that's all you get. And then the last thing we get from that meeting is a resolution to stop the selling of liquor in Far West, teetotaling it, as they used to say. John Higbee then gets a license, and then we get a discourse found only, by the way, in a book called Mormonism Exposed. Eesh. It is not exactly friendly to the church. It is an anti-Mormon book, and I find it interesting. We actually get two discourses that were only contained here. And so it's a short sort of summary of his discourse, but this is what it says. This is out of an anti-Mormon book. It says, Brother Joseph Smith then preached and took his text in 1 Thessalonians 5:15 to the 23rd verse. He preached on prophecy and said that the Spirit of God had appeared to him with wonderful light and majesty, in such a manner that he would not believe him, that we would not believe him, were he to tell us what he had seen, and that he could not say what God did these things for. But, said he, I cannot help it. I know that all the world is threatening my life, But I regard it not, for I am willing to die at any time when God calls for me. I have been beaten, abused, stoned, persecuted, and have had to escape by day and by night. I have been sued at law and have always proved myself innocent. I have had 21 lawsuits. I am of age and care not how long I live. Not my will be done, but thine, O Lord. And there you go. That's the end of that. And we'll get into another one of these later, but that was a discourse, a summary of a discourse. We get the opening page of the Elders' Journal, which is volume 1, number 3. This is talking about where the new place for the saints to land will be. And this is sort of describing that for the church. We get another license, and then we get a discourse by Joseph Smith, once again, in Mormonism Exposed, and it's short, so I'll just read it out. It says, "The prophet exhorted the brethren to be of good cheer, and not to be scared at trifles, that he would tell them when danger was near, that at present he did not even anticipate such a thing, for us to hold ourselves in readiness at a moment's warning, well armed and equipped to go down to Carroll County and rescue Brother George M. Hingle, or Brother Hingle, who is in a suffering condition, that they must expect to endure trials there." That's the discourse. So it's him sort of saying, hey guys, once again, we might have to head off and do what we got to do for one of our own. We get a receipt. We get another edition of the Elders' Journal, and then an affidavit from the state of Missouri against Joseph Smith for a confrontation between some LDS people and Adam Black at his house. Now, we're going to be hearing a lot about this. That resulted in the killing of 2 members of the church. Now, when the story got out, Joseph traveled to the area and found out that actually nobody had been killed, but a few people were definitively injured. Joseph was arrested and asked to be tried in his own county because he felt like it was a safer option, and he was probably right. Therefore, this affidavit was written and certified, but there's actually no evidence that it was ever used in court. And so this whole ordeal was confirmed to be the work of vigilantes who were trying to drive the saints away again. It was just they were using the law as a vehicle to get there. Next up, we get what's called a reconnaissance for Joseph and Lyman White to appear in Davis County Court to stand trial for some charges. The historical introduction explains kind of how this panned out, and it says, subsequent events did not permit Joseph Smith and White to appear before the circuit court in November. By then, both men were in state custody on charges of treason and other crimes allegedly committed during the conflict between church members and other Missourians in October of 1838. On the 1st of March, 1839, King delivered the reconnaissance to Robert Wilson, clerk for the Daviess County Circuit Court, who docketed the document and filed it with the court. Joseph Smith and White fulfilled the conditions of the reconnaissance when they appeared before the Circuit Court in April 1839 to answer questions that indicted the Latter-day Saint leaders and 13 other church members for rioting. So that's just him saying, like, hey, we need you to appear. But just so you know, this sort of thing that happened, this riot, this Adam Black thing, starts to escalate, and it eventually does lead to them being jailed in Liberty Jail. But we'll get to that as we go along. After this, we get a few land patents. This is basically Joseph Smith buying land. Then we get another affidavit printed in the Niles National, or Niles maybe, National Register paper under the heading of The Mormon Difficulties. And it stated this: we hereby certify that we have learned that a Mr. Nathan Marsh has certified that the people sometime called Mormons have ingratiated themselves with the Indians for the purpose of getting the Indians to commit depredations upon the people of this state, which certificate of Marsh, as represented to us, is utterly false. We have never had any communication with the Indians on any subject, and we and all the Mormon Church, as we believe, entertain the same feelings and fears towards the Indians that are entertained by other citizens of this state. We are friendly to the Constitution and laws of this state and of the United States, and wish to see them enforced." Unquote. This is signed by Joseph Smith and Sidney Rigdon and verified by Elias Higbee, our justice of the county. And so, yeah, apparently there were some accusations that they were in league with native tribes and they were going to go do stuff, and they said, we're not doing that. All right, next we get a letter from Austin King, which is a judge that Joseph Smith and Sidney wrote to for counsel and advice on the conflict happening at Adam Black's house. The judge responded with an order that the state militia should be called to defuse the situation and that everybody needs to be released and sent home. So that was good. So that little letter to Austin King, and it actually kind of sends back right away, did work, and they were able to defuse that situation. Joseph then sends a letter to a man by the name of Stephen Post, or maybe Stephen Post, but I think Stephen Post, and clarifies some doctrine, some teachings, some news about the issues that they were facing and how they were moving to Missouri. So this is just him writing to a member of the church and saying this is the situation and so forth. So kind of fun to see a little bit more of a personal approach to that rather than just in a paper. After that, we get a pay order, we get a receipt, and then we get a lot of licenses from the General Church and License Book. That's where these come from. Following these are a lot of letters of recommendation. They are called letters of introduction. I have called them letters of recommendation, but they're what's called letters of introduction, and they're for various people to speak for their character, to speak for the trustworthiness. So yeah, just basically saying like, yes, they're licensed, and yes, you can trust them to actually do what they need to do, especially as they're traveling around the branches. Then it's a statement of accounts. Just kind of, hey, here's the bill, bro. And then we get to a letter from somebody by the name of William Perkins, who was one of Joseph Smith's attorneys, who was asking for his fees to be paid. So he was not aware of all the issues with Missouri and the saints being driven out. And so we're not sure if Joseph Smith ever even got this letter. Along with this, we get a statement of account from the firm and listing out the fees that Joseph owes and all this kind of stuff. So anyway, just his attorneys are now saying, you kind of owe us some attorney fees and things like that. After this, we get a receipt, another receipt, and then we get a note from Edward Partridge saying that somebody didn't get their receipt. And so I guess that's good to have. Hey, you didn't take this with you, so I'm writing this down as a note. Anyway, then we get the next thing that we get is a letter to Emma Smith. The next thing we get then is a letter to Emma Smith. It is written in Joseph Smith's own hand. And so Joseph is arrested in October of 1838 and writes this letter on the 4th of November. So from the historical introduction, we get this. Joseph Smith and his fellow prisoners, Sidney Rigdon, Hyrum Smith, Lyman White, George W. Robinson, Parley P. Pratt, and Amasa Lyman, arrived in Independence, Missouri around noon on the 4th of November in the midst of a severe storm. The prisoners were lodged in a large old log house situated on Maple Street, immediately north of Independence's public square and courthouse. In the evening, the prisoners were provided with paper and writing materials and candles. And Joseph Smith wrote the following letter to Emma Smith, recounting the prisoners' reception in Independence and expressing anxiety for her welfare. The absence of a postmark suggests the letter was hand-delivered. So then, kind of skipping a little further into the historical introduction. By the time Emma Smith received this letter, she and her children had likely been evicted from their residence and were probably staying at the home of George and Lucinda Pendleton Harris in Far West. So things are getting bad, and they're going to get worse. The final lines from this letter, we get this. O Emma, for God's sake, do not forsake me, nor the truth, but remember, if I do not meet you again in this life, may God grant that we may meet in heaven. I cannot express my feelings. My heart is full. Farewell, O my kind and affectionate Emma. I am yours forever, your husband and true friend, Joseph Smith, Jr. So he's sort of feeling this, and you'll see this is going to increase a lot over the next few weeks and months. We then get a published letter from the Daily Commercial Bulletin to the citizens of Jackson County. This is dated on the 5th of November, 1838. This copy that you're looking at is actually found on a microfilm from the State Historical Society of Wisconsin. Again, I don't know how these guys find this stuff. It's the most random place, but yes, that's where of course they did. They found it in the Historical Society of Wisconsin. I'm just extremely impressed about the diligence that these people went through to put together the Joseph Smith papers. But anyway, the members actually thank the Jackson County residents for how they are treating Joseph Smith and company in prison. And we believe this was a play to hope that the good behavior would continue. And so they're basically praising them. Thank you so much. You're doing a fine job taking care of them and trying to build a sense of good feelings so they didn't do any violence to the prophet and his people. We got a few more statements of account, bills to pay, but there's kind of other people taking care of that because Joseph's gone. Then there is another letter to Emma Smith from Joseph's hand. He is in jail with the same people, and he says that they are chained together, but also, quote, "Thus we are bound together in chains as well as the cords of everlasting love. We are in good spirits and rejoice that we are counted worthy to be persecuted for Christ's sake," unquote. So it's kind of interesting. The end of the letter is this. It says, "Oh, my affectionate Emma, I want you to remember that I am a true and faithful friend to you and the children. Forever my heart is entwined around yours forever and ever. Oh, may God bless you all. Amen. I am your husband and am in bonds and tribulation, etc." To Emma Smith from Joseph Smith Jr. P.S. Write as often as you can, and if possible, come and see me, and bring the children if possible. Act according to your own feelings and best judgment, and endeavor to be comforted if possible. And I trust that all will turn out for the best. Yours, Joseph Smith. So kind of sad. If you can see me, please do, but please use your best judgment because obviously he probably didn't want her or his children hurt. All right, next thing that we get from this is an agreement with Alexander Donovan, one of our good friends in the church, never remember, but he was asking if Alexander would be willing to take land for payment to represent the church leaders that while they were in jail. So instead of cash, it's like, well, we can give you land instead if you like. So after this, we get another letter from to Emma, which is very brief. It says this: December 1st, 1838. My dear companion, I take this opportunity to inform you that we arrived in liberty and committed to jail this evening, but we are all in good spirits. Captain Bogard will hand you this line. My respects to all. Remain where you are at present. Yours, etc., Joseph Smith, Jr. So now we are officially in Liberty Jail, and he's going to stay there for a while. And note that date. This is December 1st. So winter is setting in, and this is a very trying time because they are in the dead of winter for the most of this. All right. The next thing we get is a long letter to the church generally in the hand of somebody by the name of Zina Huntington. It is 7 pages long on loose pages. We also get a copy of this letter to Phoebe Woodruff. One is published in the Times and Seasons, and one is in the Manuscript History of the Church. So this is kind of an important letter. It's dated the 16th of December, 1838, from Liberty Jail. So Joseph already was in state custody for about 6 weeks before they went to Liberty Jail. He went to court for 17 days for crimes that he was accused of perpetrating. And so the historical introduction shares the sort of the tone of this letter. It says this: Much of the letter condemns dissenters, the devil's emissaries. Joseph Smith contended that they cooperated with the saints' enemies during the recent conflict and were therefore responsible for the deaths of several Latter-day Saints, for Joseph Smith's arrest and incarceration, and for the expulsion of church members from the state. Joseph Smith focused his ire on the delegation that had negotiated with Major General Samuel D. Lucas on October 31, 1838. George M. Hinkle, John Corll, Reed Peck, William W. Phelps, and John Clemenson. Joseph Smith argued that the delegation had betrayed him, resorting to deception to lure him into the enemy's camp. Additionally, Joseph Smith asserted that several other dissenters, including Oliver Cowdery, David and John Whitmer, and Thomas B. Marsh, had spread false rumors that endangered the church. Joseph Smith also contended that the teachings of Samson Evard, a former Danite general, were not authorized by the First Presidency. In the letter, Joseph Smith also stated that the many dissenters who testified for the prosecution at the November 1838 hearing had borne false witness against the Mormon prisoners. But there's more to this letter than just negativity, and so the historical introduction goes on. Although much of the letter is colored by Joseph Smith's indignation towards the church's opponents, Portions of the epistle also reflect confidence that God would vindicate the saints, comparing the dissenters to Haman, Balaam, Korah, and Job's false friends, biblical figures who had sought to hinder and persecute God's people. Joseph Smith reassured church members that just as the Lord rescued his ancient followers from their oppressors, he would deliver his latter-day people. Perhaps responding to dissenters who challenged Joseph Smith's prophetic leadership, Joseph Smith also included in the letter the text of a revelation that declared he retained the keys, or the divine authority, that had been given to him. Near the close of the letter, Joseph Smith promised the saints that although Zion appeared to be dead, it would ultimately be revitalized. And that letter was very widely shared and published in the Times and Seasons periodical. Okay. We get a receipt, and then we get a petition to Elias Higbee for a writ of habeas corpus so that they didn't have to spend so much time in jail and they could actually get out. And that writ of habeas corpus ends the year 1838. So thus it ends. And thus ends this part. So as we go into our next part, we're going to be talking about early 1839, and also what I like to call the first portion of what we now call Section 121 of the Doctrine and Covenants. So